Welcome, everybody, to Popcorn Therapy, where the stories we love tell us something about who we are. I'm Julie Peters. If you're new here, I'm a therapist. I'm also a witch and other things, a writer too. And the witchy therapist perspective is going to come into our episode today on The Haunting of Hill House. It's a fascinating show, and I loved doing this episode with my guest, Emilee Nimitz. And I do want to just throw out a little bit of a content warning. There's some heavy topics that come up through this show: suicide, motherhood, parenthood, and some of the darker aspects of that, depression, addiction. Like, there's a lot of big topics that we go into. So, just make sure that you're in the right frame of mind to think about those things. And if you're not, maybe save this episode for another time. I would also recommend making sure that you've actually seen this show before you listen to this episode, because it is spoiler heavy, because we have to talk about all the things in order to kind of get to some of these deeper topics that we're going into. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly let you know that my brand new book called Witch, Healer, Priestess, Outcast drops this month. November 11th is its official release date, and it is the second in my Goddess series. So you may have already picked up Maiden, Warrior, Mother, Crone. They're these beautiful stories, these retellings of folktales or mythology, and then there's a little bit of, historical context, what it means, how to kind of work with it in your own life, and so on, all about the divine feminine. Witch, Healer, Priestess, Outcast, for me, is like a little deeper. It's a little darker. We actually had to cut two of the stories because I wanted to get so deep into the stories that were there, and we needed the space. So there's two stories that, some of you may actually get to hear at some point that aren't in the book, because I wanted to get nice and juicy with some of the ones that are there. You can get it wherever you want, including Walmart and Target, which might not mean anything to you, but is actually really awesome that they picked up this book. It's a great sign. You can also get it on Amazon. You can get it at your local bookstore, and you can ask them to order it if they don't already have it, which they might. You can ask. So it's really supportive for me if you do that, and writing a review, especially on Amazon, if you do get it there. Early reviews are super helpful for just pushing the book up in the algorithm. So even just a star rating is really helpful. So if you have that book, if you're going to get it, please do write a review. Goodreads is helpful too, just to get more people aware of the book. So thank you so much for doing that. Please enjoy this episode with my guest, Emilee Nimitz, on The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to Popcorn Therapy with me, Julie Peters. I'm here today with my guest, Emilee Nimitz, and we are having an absolute haunting of a time trying to record this damn thing. So we are recording with different audio and different video today because nothing is working. I don't know if Mercury is in Gatorade or what's going on, but here we are. So Emilee, welcome back. If you have been listening to this podcast, you have heard Emilee before. They are with me often in these conversations because we're close friends and we always text each other about what shows we should be watching, I guess. This is that happens. And in this particular case, we're going to be talking about The Haunting of Hill House, which I think, Emilee, you've wanted me to watch for a while, and I've been putting it off. So, Halloween season, I had to finish the whole thing the night before Halloween, and that's where we're at. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have to have a podcast about this. We have to talk about it. So here we are. So welcome, Emilee. Anything you want to say to introduce yourself, or anything you want to let people know about you?
Hello, Emilee, they, them pronouns. Happy to be talking. I feel like this is, I don't know no, it's not the first time we've done something that isn't Love is Blind. We do a lot of Love is Blind. We did The Substance, so I'm happy to be talking about this one. Yeah, it's like
Nosferatu. We've done a few. It's like Love is Blind or horror. That's the only, the tastes we share are horror and Love is Blind.
The multitudes, we contain multitudes. But yeah, I've been trying to get you to watch this show. I was pretty late to it as well. My introduction to Mike Flanagan, who is the director, writer, creator of several series on Netflix, including The Haunting of Hill House. My introduction to him was Midnight Mass, which I think was his third installment or third series. Haunting of Hill House is his first. I think it came out in 2018. And I didn't watch it because I was like so terrified of scary movies, like so sensitive, could not watch anything. I think the only scary movie that I like could fully get through was like Get Out. Um, and I just, yeah, like I was just so sensitive, like could not deal with it. But I've been on Lexapro for the past however many years, and I feel like it's really calmed things down for me. So I'm kind of like, no, I can handle horror. Like I thought I would never be able to. I watched Hereditary last night, fully didn't feel scared the whole time, which is crazy. Um, so yeah, so that's where I come to this. And yeah, I absolutely love this series, and I've been asking you to watch it for a long time, but obviously there's some babies in danger, so we knew it would take some time before you could come to
Yeah, babies in danger is my notorious trigger. I have a really hard time with babies in danger. And in this show, I kind of appreciated that you know the babies aren't in danger because you see the adults right away. And the adults being in danger doesn't bother me as much as the babies being in danger. So actually I was okay for until kind of the last couple episodes was like when that stuff
Yeah.
started to come up for me a bit. But yeah, I I think we talked a little bit when we had our podcast on the substance that I love horror. I think it's such an interesting genre. I think it's an incredible opportunity to talk about you know, social ills and anxieties and kind of put them in a story form so that people can digest and process what those things mean. So I feel like it's this incredible opportunity to think about things metaphorically. And I'm very sensitive. And so I have to kind of be careful about when and how I'm watching what kind of horror movies. And, you know, Haunting of Hill House, my brother, who is also not a horror guy, he watched this show and loved it. And kind of pointed out, you know, it's not really gory or violent. Like there are a couple jump scares and there's obviously some little bit of gross stuff, but it's not like for me, you know, the slasher films, I can't handle that as much. But the supernatural stuff I love, and I love a ghost story. I especially love a haunting. And it was interesting to me too, because I have Love is Blind nightmares all the time.
it.
And I have been watching the season 9, which is like maybe one of the most disturbing seasons of Love is Blind. And like I will go to bed and dream about public humiliation or like I don't know, there's like different scary things that are happening or like ex-boyfriends are popping up. Like it's these horror dreams about Love is Blind. And the first night I started watching Haunting of Hill House, which I was like violently ill that day. And I was like, I can't do anything else. Like, what should I watch? And Emily's like, Haunting of Hill House, do it. And so I binged a bunch of it that day and I had like great dreams that night. Like, there's like nothing scary. It was totally fine. For some reason, the ghosts don't bother me as much. Although obviously there were some, you know, the bent neck lady episode. I would say I had a little bit of a harder time sleeping that night because I just there were images that kept kind of going through my mind about it, and still are. I just finished the show like a few days ago, really, so it's still pretty fresh for me. And Emily, you have been on a little bit of a horror binge lately, noticing the Lexapro really dulls the fear, and you mentioned ups the disgust factor maybe, or keeps the
Yes.
disgust factor in place.
Yeah, the disgust doesn't go away. Like I don't love I watched this movie a few weeks ago called The Ugly Stepsister. I think it's from Norway or Sweden or something. It came out I think last year or earlier this year. Anyway, very disgusting body horror, like very, very nasty, gross. And I was like, okay, I wasn't scared at all in this movie, but I was absolutely repulsed and I didn't like it for that reason. I actually really did like the movie. I thought it was interesting, but I was like the disgust like I'll never watch it again. Like that was horrible.
And that was the thing for me with the substance too, is that it was so disgusting. I could never watch it twice. But I also loved the concept and the story so much. And even aspects of the disgust I thought were really important and interesting. So anyway, Hill House, I feel like I could rewatch. I want to rewatch. I'm not sure when exactly, but there's so many details that come together through the watching of the show. That yeah, I feel like I kind of want to go back again and put the pieces together differently. And also just, you know, I always like to look up what people are saying about the things that we're watching. And apparently there are 33 different like ghost cameos in the show.
Yeah.
And like I've also heard, I'm not totally sure if this is true, but like anytime you're looking at the house within the show, there is a ghost somewhere. Like there's sort of something in the background that's hiding. And I feel like that might be one of the things that the show does best in terms of its creepiness is the atmospheric feeling of the house and how each shot kind of has this depth to it where there's a lot of background behind the character
Yeah.
and there are like old pieces of furniture or like dusty things on the counter or whatever, and sometimes there's a face or like sometimes there's a ghost,
Yeah.
which you don't notice on the first watching necessarily, right? So the whole mood of the show I feel like was really intense in that way and really effective in that way.
Yeah, you definitely feel the haunting of Hill House. Definitely the director and everybody working on it has done such a great job of like really making you feel the walls of the house, feel like the legacy of the house, like the metaphorical haunting, but also just like the literal haunting with all of the ghosts around and like the black mold or like what looks like black mold. Like you feel it kind of closing in on you as the series kind of comes to its climax. And I just think it's so brilliant.
Yeah. So obviously, we're assuming anyone who's watching or listening to this podcast has seen the entirety of The Haunting of Hill House. If you haven't, please don't listen because I feel like this was definitely one of those shows where I did not want a single spoiler. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I want to know because I'm like, I'm too scared. Like I need to know what happens. But in this case, I was like, no, no, no. There was so much pleasure in like each episode a little piece was revealed and like you knew you were going to get the whole story at the end eventually, and so I think this is a really good one to really protect from spoilers whereas others I feel like well whatever it's predictable anyway or whatever, but I don't think that's the case here. So with that spoiler alert in mind, we'll just do a quick recap of the concept. So we've got the Crane family. There are five children and two parents who move into Hill House. They're house flippers. So they're going to renovate the house and fix it up and then sell it with the intention of using that money to make their forever home. The mom of the family, Olivia, is an architect or something like that. And so she's designed this forever house that they want to build after they get out of Hill House. So they come in one summer and they're only there for like a few weeks, really, but it's this very traumatic few weeks where there's this intensity of haunting and so on. And then it culminates in one night where Hugh, the father, takes all of the children out of the house to a motel. And then it's sort of explored as the series goes on that the mom killed herself or something happened. And then we follow two timelines. There's the children's timeline and what's going on in the house. And then we see how the adults are coping with the trauma they experienced, how they're believing or not believing what happened to them, how they're sort of dealing with life and each other, how they're connected, not connected. They're pretty estranged from their dad for the most part. And then in that first episode, Nell kills herself or dies or something happens to her in a very similar way to their mom. That's the youngest daughter, and then the family comes together for her funeral, and there's sort of more resolution that comes from there. So that's kind of the general structure of the story. One of the things that I found most interesting about watching it was the time jumping. There was actually one point where I accidentally skipped ahead to like episode 8 and I hadn't yet watched episode 7. And like it starts with something happening and it's just like, who broke this? How did this happen? And like, are you going to tell them what we saw? And I just didn't I didn't totally realize that I had missed a whole episode because you're skipping around in time so often and you're so often confused about like what just happened or who saw what or whatever it is that it took me almost the entire episode to be like, let me just double check. I think I might have missed something here. I look back, I'm like, okay, I had not watched the entire episode before this. I think I had watched like 40 of the 50 minutes or something before I realized. And it didn't really matter in the end because like you kind of can switch them around like puzzle pieces, and that's one of the themes of the show is like time being linear or not. And I feel like the at least one of the metaphors around that is trauma, right? Is that like when you experience trauma, it can split your memory. Like it can sort of, traumatic memory works differently than other kinds of memory. It often doesn't have a linear narrative. It's often just bits and pieces of like images and smells or sounds. Like it can be kind of a sensual thing. It's not something where you're like, this happened and then that happened. And that's kind of notorious about traumatic memory, because often if somebody is trying to like recall something that happened to them on the stand, for example, and they don't remember every detail, sometimes they're not believed, but it's actually because that's how their memory is working and not because they're lying, right? They just can't remember like how it all fit together. And the other piece is, when you do have a traumatic flashback or a trigger or something like that, um, a PTSD flashback would be like really being in that memory, your whole self, as if you are in the past. A trigger for me can be more like my nervous system is in the past, but my brain is still in the present. Like I'm still aware of where I am, but my body is reacting, like there's an outsized reaction to what's happening because my body thinks I'm back in whatever that place is. So I think it can work in different ways, but it's like your mind can split, your body can split, like you kind of dissemble and dissociate, and
Mhm.
different pieces go to different places. And I think that's one of the themes of the show, is like how what happened in the past doesn't just stay in the past, right? Like that's the literal meaning, I guess, of a haunting or a ghost, is that they're supposed to be in the past, but they're in the present, and like it kind of confuses how those things fit together.
Yeah, that's like nailing it.
So, with that thought about timelines, why don't we just start with the bent neck lady? I feel like that's the maybe the most haunting image of the show,
Yeah.
and one that people have talked about a lot. And that is one where, you know, everyone else is kind of being haunted by like ghosts from this house's past, but Nell is actually being haunted by herself.
Yeah, well, each episode in the series kind of focuses on one member of the family. So we sort of learn about Nell and her like present and her past. And she's like the youngest, she's a twin. And she like in her adulthood, she has these like sleep paralysis moments where the bent neck lady like appears to her, which is like I guess sleep paralysis potentially, but just like haunting that happened to her when she was a kid in the Hill House. And she's very scary and just like that. I feel like they do some really good jump scares in the show with her. Like she's just like boom, and it's such a striking image of this woman like with her head completely tilted to the side. It's very scary. And yeah, then there's this huge reveal, and it's like a gasp reveal in the show where they reveal that the bent neck lady is Nell, and you see that because she's sort of being haunted. Her husband has also died of an aneurysm in the present, like in the recent present. And so she sort of gets haunted again by like the house is kind of calling her back. Like it's sort she's trying to move on and she's really struggling. Like she has a sleep paralysis, like she has a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. And she's kind of the youngest kid, so she almost gets like a little bit like brushed off, like, okay, Nell is just mentally ill or whatever. But then she kind of gets called back to the house and she calls her siblings. It's one of the first things that happens in the show, actually, is you see people ignoring her phone call, and then she goes back to the house and she kind of, you see her, initially, you see like what kind of I think is happening in reality versus what's happening in her mind, or like even if those two things are sort of blended, like you sort of see it from the outside. She's sort of dancing around the house in this like really haunting way. And then she kind of accidentally kills herself on this spiral, like iron staircase, and doesn't really realize that it's happening when it's happening. And then as she then falls kind of through all of the moments that you've already witnessed in the series thus far of her seeing the bent neck lady, and then you realize that it's her that she's seeing. Um, and it's just like, it's so shocking, like the idea of like being haunted by your future self, or like even by the legacy of like of your family, like the legacy. And I really relate to this as like somebody who has had like suicide as a really heavy theme in my family, is like you're kind of like, is is that going to happen to me? Like am I going to develop that like is that something that is like genetically attached to me that I'll never be able to escape. And I've thought about that a lot in my own life because of my mother and her suicide attempts when I was growing up. And it's like this thing of like, she's sort of haunted. She's depressed, she's struggling, her husband's dead. Like there's a scene where we see her getting married to him and we see their like love story and they're very, very happy together, and then he sort of dies suddenly, tragically, and then everything kind of goes bad again. And so the kind of mysticism of the house is killing her, but it's also like the house as grief, the house as trauma is what she eventually succumbs to, like if you want to think of it that way. Um, and then, I mean, there's more to even say about the ending and like how she shows up to the siblings and how that all resolves. But like, it's just so tragic. It's like she's haunted by this almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, where she's like, yeah, will I do this to myself? Which she dies in a very similar way to her mother.
Yeah. I think there are a few different ways to look at that too, because she's sort of stuck in a time loop. It's like because of the bent neck lady, or that's the narrative, right? Is like it's the bent neck lady, she's after me, she's trying to hurt me. And because of how scared little Nell was in the house, that creates the problems that eventually lead to her returning to the house where we'll talk more about the mom and so on and how Nell eventually dies. But um then she dies in this way and goes back and visits that younger version of herself and so on. And I was trying to remember specifically all of the moments where she shows up, because I think one way of looking at it is that Nell was blaming the bent neck lady for these problems all along, when actually the bent neck lady was like herself witnessing her difficult moments in her life, right?
Mm,
It's like she was trying to show up for that younger part of her. Like in the moment when Arthur dies, her husband, the bent neck lady is standing there in the corner and she thinks it was the bent neck lady who did it, but actually it was like herself showing up to be like, this is a really horrible moment for you and I want to be there for you.
mm,
I'm thinking of this show very much from my therapist perspective. And, one thing that we will practice all the time is like we go back and visit younger versions of ourselves, right? That are often trapped in a time loop. They're trapped in like a traumatic moment. And so we can like close our eyes and we can go visit that younger self. And it's a really fascinating process because that younger self is frozen in time, and it's kind of literal in the sense that, yes, what happened in the past happened in the past, but that young version of you is not in the past. That young version of you is in the present day, affecting your day-to-day life, right?
yeah.
And so if we can actually contact that younger self, we can ask that little self questions and so on. And it's really fascinating because often that little self will have information that we don't have, the adult self doesn't know. And we'll sometimes be surprised to find out, like, oh, she doesn't want, me to tell her everything's going to be okay. She actually wants me to cry with her, or like she actually wants me to stand up for her right now and like yell at the person who's hurting me or whatever it might be. And it's like that little self has the information about what needs to be healed. And often the adult self makes assumptions about what the healing is supposed to be. And those assumptions can sometimes be wrong, right?
Mm,
So, it's this very interesting kind of like the way I experience that all the time with my clients and have myself as well. It's almost an unhaunting, right? It's like going back and releasing that younger part from a time loop. And I've actually heard some interesting stories of people having moments where they like saw a person, like an adult, come and like comfort them or help them in a really difficult moment in their life, and then later they're in therapy and they like go and do that healing process and they realize that they're in that time, that same time loop that Nell was in, where like the adult self did actually show up and help the younger one.
mm,
But from this perspective, the adult, well, I don't know. Like the bent neck lady is obviously scary, and in a way, you can look at it as Nell, as the adult self, is broken. She doesn't have the resources to help the younger self yet, right? And yet, if we think about what happens in the last couple of episodes, Nell from the afterlife actually helps her siblings a lot. Like she actually shows up and she actually saves Luke's life. actually as her child self. Like it's kind of hard to explain, but um, little Nell is sitting at the tea party and like Olivia is about to poison everybody with rat poison. And Luke is trying to sit down. Olivia's like, come sit with us, join the tea party. And little baby Nell is like, don't do it, don't. And then as the adult ghost as well, she kind of pulls Luke out of the that place, and she ends up rescuing all of her siblings in a way from as a ghost as opposed to as a a living person.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit non-traditional, but I'll share it anyway. So as a therapist, I can do sort of straightforward therapy things, but I also like to do spiritually oriented stuff too, because I feel like there's not that as much of a distance between the spiritual and emotional as people often think.
Mhm.
And I've done work with ghosts in the sense of like, let's go talk to that person who's passed over, and like let's actually ask them what they think. And it's this interesting thing where often people will find you don't need a psychic medium to do that. You can do it yourself, right? And you will often be surprised that the person you're trying to connect to is right there and they have information that you don't have, right?
Mhm.
Like you do. I mean, who knows what's really happening there, but it really can feel like sometimes people can be helping from the afterlife. Like it's a much gentler, calmer perspective to all of this than the way we see it on Haunting of Hill House. And yet it really resonated with me from this perspective of like, sometimes we need to contact either different versions of ourselves, or sometimes we need to like have a talk with that ghost that's been haunting us, of like our mother who passed over, or like that friend we never resolved with, or whatever it is, living and dead. We can do it with
Mhm.
the spirit of anybody. And who knows, like real illusion, mind, whatever, like it doesn't matter because it works, right? So I think from all of that perspective, it's really interesting to think of the bent neck lady as a maybe a failed witness, but she's a witness, right? And she learns skills to heal that she does eventually use in the show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, totally. And it's like as Nell is dying, in this way that was shocking to her and scary, she's observing herself in all of these moments as well. Like she is the bent neck lady, but she's also seeing herself so scared that she drops, like she's getting the water and she drops on the floor, or like she's on the bed and she's like hovering over top of her. Like she's seeing her so scared, and it's like she wants to reach out and help her, but she's just not been able to, because part of it is that she's not been believed. Like she spent a lot of her life, like a lot of her family is like really dismissive of her. They're just like, oh, and like especially the older brother Steven, like he's very like, is she off her meds, which is like, as somebody who's on meds, meds are great, but yeah, it's like there's this, like how much of that is like her needing to be on meds, and how much of it is just like her needing somebody to like bear witness to her pain, or like be there for her so that she can then be there for herself and be the person for her younger self.
There's a moment when there's a big storm happening, and the family is all gathered together after the chandelier has fallen and all the hail is breaking through the windows and stuff. So they're all gathered together in the sort of lobby area of the house. And Nell disappears, and they all kind of go into this panic trying to find her. And they eventually find her, and she says, this is the young Nell, why couldn't you see me? Why couldn't you see me? I was standing right here. I was screaming and waving my arms, and you couldn't see me. Why couldn't you see me? And we never get the answer to that question aside from like, it's a haunted house. Like, like you disappeared for a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But that's the metaphor for Nell, right? Is that she's not being witnessed. And so how interesting that that's what her spirit, soul, body, system, whatever did, is that it found a way to witness herself because nobody else
Mm,
was witnessing her, right? Like if only that little girl had known, like it's just me checking in on me or trying to see me, like that could have been healing as
yeah.
opposed to terrifying, right?
Yeah, totally. And like just like like even her as the younger self having that knowledge as well, that like she needs to be witnessed. She needs to be trusted and loved and all of those things. Like even that moment with the writing, and the mom is getting Olivia's getting really mad at her because she's written her name on the wall, but then we learn in through the time loop of everything it was the mother writing on the wall, and she's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And I will say too, in that episode, the big storm episode, which is I think one of the best episodes of television because it's basically a one shot. I think there's maybe two cuts in the whole episode. But the beginning of the episode is upstairs in the funeral parlor the night before her funeral, and all of the family has come back together, reunited for the funeral, and it's been a very long time since they've all been in the same room, including the dad. And it's shot in a one take. We call it a oneer in the biz. And so for anybody not in the know, basically it's like the camera doesn't ever stop or cut. Like they're basically performing the show as a play, and there's these brilliant moments when the camera will sort of turn around to the dad, see the dad's reaction, turn back, and all of the adult actors have been replaced by the children versions, which is just like crazy. Like just from a technical perspective, it's so crazy, but it's such a beautiful metaphor. And it's like just the technical prowess of that alone is so brilliant because there's so many moving parts when it comes to film, like lighting and sound and all of these things. So like it's not just actors acting and there's a camera catching them. It's like there's whole teams of people. So it's so impressive. And like it's crazy because literally in that they follow the dad, the older version of the dad, Hugh, into the haunted, like into Hill House, and it's almost like his memory. You're kind of going through and like witnessing his memory of this storm and how that is happening at the same time as this sort of fight that's happening around the family coming together and like all of the past being dredged up. And it's interesting. The dad says something in the present day. The dad says something like, I think this is in this episode. He says to Stephen, "You don't understand Hill House, you never have." And he's just like, let me lay it down here. Like, supernatural things are happening, and we have basically Nell, who is now dead. Like, you know, this is the result of us not believing her. This is the result of us ignoring, trying to pretend like that didn't happen. And then at the very, very end of that episode, they're all fighting, and the camera is focused on the foreground of the adults fighting. Nell's in the casket at the back, and the casket falls like very loud, and they all stop and they all turn and they walk over her, which again, I'm like, technically, how did they do that? Like, that is crazy. But they go back to her, and it's like the casket has fallen and she's out, and it's almost like, again, she's trying to get their attention, like, even as a, like, it as a dead body, she's like, just listen to me, like, just pay attention to me. And it's like, yeah, it's really, really, oh, Nell, love Nell.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think after they resolve all that, they all decide to leave, and we just see the ghost of Nell. I forget if her neck is bent or not, but I think it might be. But she's just standing there, like being left alone, you
Yeah.
know, in to with her dead body for this, and everybody just goes back to their lives. And you see this. I mean, she's just standing there, but you see this loneliness and this sadness, you know, of not being believed. And you know, I think that's a really important theme to this show as well, because you know, one of the things about trauma for a lot of people, including me, it's not the thing that happened, it's how it was responded to, right? So there have been some studies that have shown that, like, if someone is violated, let's say if a woman is violated in a community, and everyone in the community believes her and, you know, find the person and bring them to justice and all this stuff, and everyone agrees, like, that was horrible, that shouldn't have happened to you, that person is not traumatized. You know, using this concept of that trauma isn't the thing that happened, it's how your system um, holds the thing,
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't heal from the thing, right? Like, my favorite definition of trauma is any unhealed wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, you can have a plane crash, some of the people will be traumatized, others will not be traumatized, right? It's like people have different reactions to this stuff. So if you have a situation where someone is violated, and that person is not believed, they have to fight to be heard, you know, the person is not brought to justice, which is usually what happens in this society, that person is much more likely to be traumatized, because it's not so much that something bad happened, it's that they weren't believed, they weren't supported, they weren't loved, and like found out that justice isn't important to this community, and therefore that makes the whole world a lot more scary, and so on, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I absolutely loved about this show was how often something scary and haunting would happen, and there would be an explanation for it right in the next moment. So it would be like, oh, mom was schizophrenic, you know, like that's what happened. Like she had a mental illness and that's why she killed herself. And, there was in Shirley's episode where she has these kittens that all sort of end up dying in this weird way. And at one point, one of them appears to still be alive. It opens its eyes and it has these like demon eyes, really terrifying. And then in the next scene, it's like, oh, those diseased kittens. Like we had to put down those diseased kittens. And you're like, oh, what? Like it was a disease? Like I've never seen a disease with eyes, demon eyes, but sure, it could be, I guess. And so, there's so much of like, is this a mental illness? Stephen very much thinks that it's a mental illness. He doesn't believe his own eyes, right? Like he sees the ghost of Nell and he's seen actually many other ghosts, but he just doesn't like admit it to himself. And so he finds explanations for it. And I loved not knowing whether or not the show was going to commit either way, because a lot of shows like this will end on kind of like well, was it real? I don't know. Like they like to kind of end on, you know, leave it to the viewer to decide kind of thing, which can be compelling. But in this case, they really committed to the haunting. They were like, this is supernatural. These are ghosts. They are real. This is what's happening. And I really liked that it made that commitment in that sense and kind of went fully to that place of, mom did not kill herself actually. And we'll have to talk more about what happened with the mom because that's like big for me. But it just that idea of like, is it illusion? Is it reality? Am I confused or is this actually happening? And so, everybody thought that Nell had a mental illness because she was the only one that kind of thought that it was real, and everybody else found ways to, cope out of it and pretend it wasn't real and so on. And so it's ironic that she is the only one that really kind of understood what was going on. She was the sanest of them, but she was the one that wasn't believed, right? Okay, so there's this thing about waking up, right? Um, as it turns out, there are some really malevolent ghosts in Hill House. And Poppy is one of those, right? So Poppy is someone who's lived in the house, and I think she killed her children.
Yeah.
Is that right? This is the piece that really haunts me, right, as a mother, in particular me, and like what I've experienced in terms of that. So Poppy became a mother in the house. It's this sort of concept of like the world is really scary and we have to protect our children from the world. And the only way to protect them and keep them safe and keep them as they are as children, as like my children that belong to me, I have to kill them. She doesn't use those words, but she says we have to wake them up. Like we wake them up and then they get to be here forever, right? And so it's kind of this idea that like in the context of Hill House, waking up would be becoming a ghost, because when you're a ghost, you can't grow anymore. You have to stay right in that spot, right? So for me, watching this, important context is that I've had 5 miscarriages. I've had 5 pregnancy losses, which to me feels like 5 babies that I never got to know, and so on. I had one of those miscarriages before my living older son, and a bunch of them before my baby, who's doing just fine, who's almost 7 months old, 7 months tomorrow. When I had my first son, Grant, I remember feeling like the way I felt about him was unbearable. Like I loved him so much that I actually couldn't bear it. Like it was a really painful feeling how much I loved him. And it came along with, let's be fair, this was a COVID baby. He was born in December 2020. We're in a global pandemic. Like I'm somebody that already has anxiety, all these things. Like there was so much terror for me. And for me, the specific thing is like doing something wrong and then him dying because I did something wrong. And the only thing, I don't know if I want to put a trigger warning on this statement because I don't know. I who knows how folks are sort of receiving this. I am okay. But the only thing that I could say to myself to comfort that anxiety was, well, if he dies, I'll just die too. Right? It's like this really intense feeling of like I literally could not live without this child, and my literal survival is wrapped up in them. Right? Been through a lot since then. Lots of healing, lots of processing, all of those things. So the feeling is a little bit different, but it's still there. And actually last week when I got really sick, some of that terror came up because I was alone with the 2 babies, and one of them's not a baby, Grant's almost 5, but it was like this, if I can't be there for them, like what will happen to them? Like it was this terror of, in this case, I was just like bent over the toilet. I was just really sick in that way. And I was okay, and my husband ended up coming home. But it was like this real fear that came up again of being alone with them, because what if I do something wrong? What if I miss something? All of those things. And so, when I was watching Olivia, who's the mother of these children, in her episode, there's this moment of like she's holding the babies, her twins, and they're just sleeping on her. And she's like, I wish I could just freeze them like this. Like, I wish they could just stay like this forever, because they grow up so fast and they're not, little babies like this anymore. And I remember hearing once this concept of like children grow so fast that you fall in love with this child, and then before you know it, they're a different child. And like you fall in love with that child too, but the child they were
Mm.
before just isn't anymore. They, like even the newborn Ozzy, my baby, like he's not a newborn anymore now. He's 7 months. Like within a few months, he'll be walking, talking, like he just won't be this little baby anymore. Like I have such a visceral sense of like the temporality again of all of that, right? Like how
Mm.
fast it can all go. And so to bring this back to Olivia and Poppy, it's like Poppy convinces Olivia that she can keep the children safe by waking them up, which is killing them. And so she sort of falls for this because she has, I think, some of the same vulnerabilities that I have as a mother. Obviously, I'm not going to kill my children. And like, I think it's Munchausen syndrome or something like that. There's like a syndrome where a mom will like, or I guess a dad, theoretically, I think it's only been moms, but they'll like poison their children a little bit so that they're always sick and they always have to take care of them. It's a sort of a disorder.
Munchausen's by proxy. It's like,
Munchausen's by proxy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Something like, yeah. Thank you. So, at a certain point, watching the show, I was checking in with you because I was like, okay, this family is like haunted by a mother's suicide. Like, how are you doing with this show? Like, is this not really upsetting for you? And what you said was, it's kind of nice to see yourself in stories sometimes. And that's actually how I felt about Olivia's story, not because again, I'm not going to kill my children, but just like the intensity of the feeling of that, and some of the darkness that comes up around it, that I think people don't often talk about, that like that there can be darkness around, being a mother, becoming a mother, the struggles of infertility, miscarriages, things like that. The intensity of like what happens to your body, going through all of that process, and then some of the feelings that you have about your children, which can range from like deep joy to like extreme annoyance to, this sort of dark intensity that I'm talking about, where I feel like if either of my children died, I don't know what I would do, because I have two now. So
Hmm.
I can't just cop out by saying like I'll cop out too, right?
Yeah.
If I have any, that's very dark. Sorry, I feel like I hope it's okay to be hearing that for you and for those listening to the podcast, because it's like I know that's very dark, and also it's just true about one of the ways that my mind works around this, right? And one of the ways that I kind of have to think about things in order to like cope with the intensity of that. Anyway, I'm not sure everyone is as intense about mothering as I am. Probably lots of people are sunshine and rainbows, and there's some of that too, but that's just not where I'm coming from. And it was really interesting to see that with Olivia and Poppy. And then, the next piece of this is Abigail, who is this little girl who everyone thought was Luke's imaginary friend, turns out to be the Dudleys' real child, living child. And because the Dudleys were so afraid all the time, because they worked at Hill House and were constantly kind of, aware of how scary the world was, they protected Abigail to the point of like homeschooling her, never letting her leave the house, all of these things. So in desperation, Abigail like escapes the house, befriended Luke, and the one night she stays for a sleepover, which is just this like really innocent thing, that was the night that Olivia was kind of in this, psychotic break slash haunting, where she decided, oh, I'll take this child too. Like I don't think she knew if Abigail was like real or not. She was just like, have some tea slash rat poison, and Abigail actually dies that night. And so there's this sense of like, okay, these parents were trying so hard to protect Abigail that protection actually led to her demise, right? And then there's this speech, like for me, the thing that really got me the most was Hugh's speech at the end, when he says something like, when you have children, you have to witness them. It's that witnessing again that's coming up.
Mm.
It's like
Yeah.
you have to be with them through suffering, through loss. Sometimes you even have to watch them die. And that's what parenting is. It's not protecting them from everything that could hurt them in the world. And that is so true. And
Yeah.
as I like feel that way about my boys and like, I love them so much. Of course, I would want to protect them from everything, but also I know that doesn't benefit them. That doesn't even keep them safe, right?
Hmm.
Like if I were to protect them from the bad things in the world and not tell them about, these things that are happening, like all I can do is be a resource for them and like set them free, right? It's like you have to kind of push your babies out of the nest and like hope that they can fly, because if you keep them in the nest, they will die. And that's kind of one of the things I think Hill House is a metaphor for, is like keeping things inside, like keeping them too protected and too safe. And then that's actually how things rot and die, is if they're not allowed to grow, right? And
Hmm.
so I lose, I lose the babies, as like Grant's not a baby anymore and like Ozzy won't be a baby for much longer. They'll continue to become these other people, but my job as their mother is to like witness them in that and support them in that and encourage them to grow into whoever it is that they're going to be, rather than try to make them stay. Because I think when you try to make them stay, you're essentially that's more of like an ownership, right? It's like, you're my baby and I want you to be a baby in these ways and I'm going to insist that you stay. Like that's not love, right? That's something else. Like love is actually letting someone be who they are, and that can be totally heartbreaking.
Oof. Yes. Yeah,
So
exactly. And everything that you're saying about Olivia, like my mother was never, my mother, who's alive, by the way, who's just had suicide attempts. Once when I was a baby, and once, and then later when I was a teenager, a couple of times, and into young adulthood. And yeah, like she does exactly what you're saying of like wanting to keep them as these things. Like it's still like I'm not really close with my mother. I don't really talk to her, but it's still a conversation that we have that I'm just like, you do not see me as a person. Like I am a child to you. And that is a problem because like you were not good to that child. Like you were not there for that child. And I think of, yeah, like and my mother was never also homicidal. Like she wasn't trying to kill me or anything. She was basically like clinical depression and just like was never around. But yeah, just like thinking about that desire for everything to just stay, like the stagnancy of it is, yeah, it's so rough. And you see these kids sort of dealing with the repercussions of that, like they can't move on because they have this memory of this person who was just like desperately clinging to um this haunting, like clinging to her grief, essentially. Like I kind of see it as like the house is this metaphor for, I mean, it's a bunch of things, but like one of the things that I really see is it being this metaphor for grief. And with the Dudleys and Abigail and Mrs. They also had a miscarriage as well. So at the very end, you see Mrs. Dudley when she, oh my God. And one of like I just burst into tears every time I see this moment when the husband, she's dying and he brings her into the house to die in the house so that she can then live with her like as a ghost with her ghost children. And it's like then she has her ghost baby and her and ghost Abigail, and he's like he's old and you assume he'll eventually join them as well. Like I sort of see that as being like that grief for Mrs. Dudley was so insurmountable that she couldn't leave it. Like that grief, she had to stay there because she couldn't like close the loop on the trauma. She couldn't like of course, like how are you going to get past that? Like both of your children, like essentially, I mean, one a miscarriage, your other child was murdered by like a woman who was like haunted or mentally ill, depending on how you look at it. And so I kind of see them as like this couple that's just like they still had love, they still had love in the end. It was still a loving act for her to like stay there. So it's sort of showing her like needing to be there and needing to be in the house with the babies and and that she can't leave that. Of course she can't. Like she's desperate for Hugh at the end. Don't burn the house down. Like don't demolish it. We need it. We need this place. Like we do need it. And I just like
there
that
are
destroys
precious
me.
things here and not all of them belong to you,
Yes,
is what she
yeah.
says.
And it's funny because I've this is my third rewatch of it recently, and every time when you see like him like putting Mrs. Dudley like down, I like burst into tears because I think that's just such like like an honesty in its, you know, kind of supernatural take. It's so honest to be like, the house is a place of grief. Like, she's not going to leave it. She's not going to leave that house, and she should not have to because she's had such horrible things happen. And so now she's going to stay there, and that's her legacy. And it's tragic, but it's also honest, and it's beautiful, and it's horrible, and it's all of those things. And so I think it's like interesting because it's not being prescriptive about what to do about grief or trauma or whatever. Like, I really, that's what I really appreciate about it. And that's what I really love about that show too, is because it's like, you know, like you're saying, it's like these are very, very real themes for me, like suicidal mommy. That one, it's like the number one, you know, it's such a defining moment of my life. It's not concluding, oh, she's crazy, she should have taken, you know, Halidol or whatever the drug is for schizophrenia, or she should, like, it's not saying anything about that, which I really appreciate, because that's not how it feels on the inside of the moment. Like, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like, surely if somebody's going through those kinds of, like, you know, whatever they're, those delusions or whatever it is, like, there is a connection to, like, this is true, like there's a truth there for that person. And um that's what I just really loved about this show, is that it wasn't trying to be prescriptive. It wasn't trying to like make any conclusions about suicide or mental illness or grief. Like, it's just like, you know, these are all things, these are all possibilities, and there's no right way to do it. And it's, and like, it's honest to talk about life in this way, that it's painful, that it's hard.
Yeah, I loved the happy ending in a way, right? The possibility that a haunted house was not all bad. It wasn't all evil. It
Hmm.
wasn't all demons in there necessarily. Even Poppy, who I feel like is sort of the villain of the show in the sense that she's the one that convinces Olivia to try to kill her children. And that's kind of the danger, is that, you know, the children shouldn't come back to the house because Olivia is still there trying to get them to like wake up with her. But even that is kind of like, it's a loving motherly intention, right? It's like, I want to keep you forever. It's because of love that I want to do that, which is dark. And love is like that sometimes, right? I mean, I feel like yet another metaphor is this, the abusive relationship, right? That idea of like, what I will do to make you stay with me and not be with anybody else and not move on, and you know, all of those things. Um, so yeah, you know, and from my perspective, grief, like from a therapist perspective, grief isn't all bad. You know, a lot of the work I do with my clients is befriending emotions like grief and anger, because they're there for a reason. They're really important. And like, I think grief in particular, you can cozy up to it, right?
Hmm.
Like if you, it's the resisting feeling those feelings that can get you in trouble, right? But if you have something to grieve and you're grieving, like, that's okay, right? What if that was okay? Like, what if you were just allowed to feel sad and like stay in bed and watch shows and just like feel that way, right? And you know, for me, the Halloween season is interesting because Samhain in the wheel of the year was the blood harvest, the harvest of the animals before the winter. And so built into that day was an acknowledgement of death and loss, and that like you can't keep all the things, right? And I've sort of been thinking about, like, I'm doing all this work with you know, the goddess cycle, which is life, death, and rebirth, and so on. And you know, it's something that I often think about, especially around solstice, because it's sort of like there's Halloween, and then it's fall is the death season, right? It's a season of dying. The leaves fall from the trees, and everything kind of goes into hibernation, and so on. The world looks like death at solstice. It's like that darkest day, but then the rebirth begins again. But what I've been thinking about lately is that the same things aren't reborn. You know, it's like,
Hmm.
it's not, you don't actually have the same leaf that you had last year on the tree. It's a new leaf. And it might look similar, but like it's always different, right? There's different kinds of growth with that. Like you're never the same in that cycle
Hmm.
of rebirth. And so, you know, I think there's something about grief that is, you know, allowing death, acknowledging death so that there can be a rebirth. But that rebirth shouldn't be the expectation that you'll be exactly the way you were before, right? It's like allowing for a new version of you or a new version of the world or whatever it is, like something new to grow in the place of where the thing was lost.
Yeah.
I want to talk about addiction a little bit. That's going to be a bit of a tangent, but the way addiction works is like wanting to, you know, replay the same relief feelings over and over again. Like you can really get stuck in a loop with addiction. And I think the show actually, I think it's actually one of the better expressions of addiction in a TV show that I've seen,
Hmm.
including the flaws of the recovery system, which I'll
Yeah.
come back to that because I'm trying to make a point here, which is that grief has its beauty to it, right? Like that there are um, that in that Halloween season and Remembrance Day in particular, which is like in Canada, November 11th, we take the day off usually to remember the losses of the wars. Specifically, it's kind of a military oriented holiday. But I think every culture around the world, almost everyone usually has a Day of the Dead, like a day where you think about death and the ancestors and your losses. And it's like an appropriate day to feel sad and bring up your ancestors' pictures and like cry and light a candle, and like it's ritualized and it's something supported by the community. We don't tend to do that here. And Halloween is a joke of that, right? Like Halloween is a spectacle of death. It's not actually engaging with death. So
Hmm.
for me, like the first days of November into November 11th, like those are days where we should be ritualizing grief. We should be, all of us, we should be pausing and taking some time to like see the leaves falling off the trees and like acknowledge the death and losses in our lives. Because if we do that, it's a healthier way to like, live, die, and regrow, than trying to pretend it's not real, right? Which is very much what we do in this culture. So, from that therapist perspective, grief has its positive things. And kind of as I mentioned before, like ghosts, if we take for a moment, if we suspend our disbelief, if ghosts are real, there are different perspectives on what ghosts might be. One is like a trapped energy of a trauma that happened in that space, right? And it's not actually a person or something. It's like a trapped, like a little vortex of something that happened there, right? Um, and maybe ghosts are kind of like the ghost slash angel that Nell was, where a lot of people believe that people who have passed over hang out and come and visit us and like help us out, and we can talk to them. And like in my experience, you can light a candle and talk to them, and they show up, and you can talk to them. Maybe it's happening in your head, but also maybe they're really there. Like I don't know. Either way, it's still valuable and it still exists, and it's not someone trying to scare you. It's someone trying to talk to you, someone trying to help you, someone trying to give you, support and guidance, whatever it is, right? Like that we can have that relationship with our ancestors if we want to. So I loved that perspective that these things could be positive. And I will say, the one problem I had with this show, which I suppose could change on rewatching, this is the first time I've watched the show, but actually, when Abigail dies, the Dudley's reaction was like the only part where I kind of got like thrown out of the story a little bit, because it's this weird moment where they're like, "Oh no, my daughter is dead," and then they see her in the doorway as a ghost, and they're like, "Oh, it's okay, she's a ghost. That's fine."
Yeah.
And then they're just like, "Okay, great. The solution is just keep the house here, and then we can be with our daughter forever, and that's fine." Like if that were me, I'd be like, oh my God, A, my child is dead. B, my child is a ghost. Okay, what does that mean my child is a ghost? Are they going to grow up? Are they okay? Can they talk to me? Are they stuck in a loop of what's happened to them, or are they continuing to like be a person? Like there's so many questions about what it means to be a ghost. Like, is it scary? Can you make friends with the other ghosts? Like what like what is this life like for you, right? Or non-life or whatever it is. Like I feel like it was just such a weird kind of non-reaction to this kind of like, oh well, as a ghost, that's fine. And I mean, maybe that fits because the Dudleys, what they were trying to do is protect Abigail so closely that she couldn't really grow. And like maybe they actually kind of liked her, in this like, oh, she's safe now, in the same way that
Yeah.
Poppy did. Like, she's safe now. She'll never change. She'll never be hurt again. Like, she's just going to be here and I'll join her there, when it's time. But that was the one part that I was kind of like, ooh, that was like the one piece that did not resonate with me emotionally the way so much of the rest of it did.
Yeah, totally. Like she doesn't go and like start strangling the dad because I think the mom is dead like Olivia's dead at that point. She doesn't have a reaction towards like you fucking killed my kid.
Yeah. No, it's almost like not
It's like
surprised. Yeah.
it's like no, she's dead. Okay, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. We have a new plan. It's all okay. Yeah.
Yeah, recalibrating. We're good. We're good. We'll just
Yeah.
die. We'll just die in the house. Everything will be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so true. And like, obviously, I mean, in the conversation around addiction, and I mean, we can now, I think, sort of talk about the different siblings and sort of what they represent in terms of like, I've heard some people say that they're the stages of grief. Some people say that they are responses to like not dealing with your emotions, which I do like that metaphor a lot. Like Nell is depression. Stephen is like over intellectualizing. Theo is like completely being avoidant. Shirley is like, Shirley just like literally becomes in charge of death by running a funeral parlor. Like she just like gets to work,
Control. Yeah, she
control.
control. She wants to fix it. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you have Luke who becomes he develops an addiction to drugs. And oh, I just love Luke so much. I just feel like this character is like, oh my gosh, he really gets me. Um, and you witness his cycles of like getting better, getting worse, needing to get well before I get better or whatever. Yeah.
right.
I just think that that is like very honest about how that looks and the connection of that addiction. We don't know what happens in the middle of their lives. We see them as children, we see them as adults. We don't know what it was like being raised by their Aunt Janet. Like we hear reference to Aunt Janet. I think we see her maybe once in the whole series or a couple episodes here and there. She's not a major character, but she did raise these children. We don't witness that part of their lives. We just see the beginning and the kind of like the the repercussions of it. We don't see how they developed through that, but you can kind of guess how they got to where they were. And it's really, I think it's really interesting to see this kid Luke, who is like, he had this trauma being dropped in the elevator and seeing one of the ghosts who like, ripped his shirt. And again, he's not really being believed. He's not being believed about Abigail. And he is, he sees like the tall man with the hat who kind of haunts him and haunts the halls. And then he has this counting to seven thing that he does. Um, and then yeah, you see him like in the throes of his addiction and oh, it's just like, yeah, this is somebody who is doing something, like I think the link from like trauma to addiction is like pretty well established. In I'm not an expert, but like from the Gabor Mate that I've read, there's a strong link there between trauma and addiction, and how, it's a way of coping with not feeling those feelings because like those feelings are difficult to feel. And I think that people probably have some version of that they relate to, whether like for me, it's like I watch a lot of TV and I like a lot of sweet foods. And sometimes I'm like, I need to have some candy right now because I don't want to like sit in this feeling. I mean, addiction to drugs specifically. Yeah, it'll help you
Yeah,
not feel those feelings. It'll make you feel only the good feelings.
yeah, yeah. Luke, um, I thought it was interesting how the metaphor of seeing was big with him, and like there's so much with like he had those thick Coke those Coke bottle glasses when he was a kid, and then somebody in rehab was telling a story about witnessing a child whose eyes had melted from some sort of war crime or something like that. And the man in the bowler hat was always looking away, like behind, that was the back of his back. And finally, he comes up and is like back to back with Luke, and Luke turns around to finally look at the man, and it turns out it's his mother actually with her eyes closed. And then she opens her eyes and there's this light that comes out of her eyes. I think she says, "Come home," right? Which
Mhm.
for now we know from Olivia's perspective means come die with me in the house so that we can be awake together forever as
Yeah.
ghosts. Um, which is, lovingly sinister. Um, but yeah, I think that, for him, the heroin protected him from seeing, right? Like that seeing what happened, like having the flashback, sort of remembering again from a trauma metaphor perspective. That's what how the heroin was protecting him. It was like keeping him blind to the
Mm.
truth of what was happening, preventing him from having to, I don't know, do what Nell did, which is like she believed it and people thought she was crazy, right? And so for him, it was easier to be on drugs and be seen that way, I guess, than to have to fight to be believed on something he wasn't even sure he believed himself. Um, and I will just say a little bit. I have a bit of a different perspective on addiction than some traditional counselors do. And one of those is that, like you said, addiction is an energy. It's not a substance, right? It's not like the problem isn't the substance. Um, there can be lots of different ways that we can be addicted to different things. And Gabor Mate talks about this in an interesting way. He's not the only one, lots of other people do as well. But for me, the energy of addiction is like where pleasure brings you deeper into your body. Pleasure allows you to feel deeply and be really fully present with what you're experiencing. Addictive or numbing energy is only the relief of not feeling
Mm.
something that you don't want to feel, right? So when there's stress, when there is anxiety, like we all do it really in different ways. And it can hit a point where it's really interrupting someone's life, like living the way they live. And I think it's kind of difficult to define exactly what addiction is because it sort of depends on the person who's in that experience. But one thing I really appreciated was that, in my opinion, too many of the traditional forms of treatment for addiction don't acknowledge trauma. Like it's that like that link that is definitely pretty well established hasn't quite made it into the treatment of it all.
Hmm.
So a lot of treatment is based on abstinence only, and like the goal is to stop using the substance or behavior, and that's it, like end of list, right? The 12-step program is interesting and helpful for some people. I honestly think the most helpful thing about 12-step is that you have a community of people that you're doing it with. But one
Yeah.
of the flaws and failures that I see in that is you have this community that loves you unconditionally unless you relapse. If you
Mm.
relapse, you're not welcome in that room until you're clean again. And you tend to lose all of the friends that you had because it's not safe, necessarily for those people to stay around you if you've relapsed, which is fair. But also, I love that concept that connection is the opposite of addiction. It's not abstinence, it's connection, right?
Yeah.
And so when there's this shame around relapse, which is like relapse is a part of the recovery process, like it's gonna happen, right? And we
Yeah.
can learn a lot of useful things from that relapse and see how we've grown and so on. It's that life, death, rebirth cycle again. But instead, some people, will be going through the program, they get however far, they relapse, and then they have to start from the beginning again, and it can feel so humiliating. And shame tends to be a really, really big factor with addiction
Mm.
as well. Like shame is often what's driving the need to numb because shame is such an intolerable feeling. And so I feel like it adds to that shame. And when Luke in this show, he leaves the treatment center in order to go after his friend who is relapsing, I guess. And we don't totally find out like what happened with her and so on, but she's relapsing. He goes after her. And then they don't want to let him back into the recovery center because they're like, these are the rules. This is the protocol. She's not allowed back. You're not allowed back. And then you just see Luke like literally out on the street. He gets mugged and he actually doesn't relapse, which is kind of like impressive that he
Hmm.
doesn't. But, he gets mugged and all these things. And he's actually having these somatic symptoms of death because his twin sister is dying and they have this connection, the twin thing. And so he feels as if he's going through withdrawal, but he isn't because he actually manages not to use. But you look at that person and you're like, how could this person, keep going without any support? Like he needs a bed tonight, or
Yeah.
he's going to do some heroin and sleep on the street because like that's his only choice, right?
Yeah.
And that's what ends up happening to a lot of people is the support is withdrawn because there's this moral judgment on someone using when actually addiction is often the only thing between that person and suicide is often, what it is. It's like that addiction is what's keeping them alive
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. So, I think, from my perspective, addiction has to be respected. Actually, it has to be worked with in a bit of a different way rather than white knuckling, like, quit the substance and just like good luck. It
Yeah.
has to kind of be like, okay, so when you're not using the substance, what comes up? Like, what is it that's so scary? Like, what are the ghosts, right? What's haunting
Yeah.
you? And if you can face it directly, like Nell does, seeing herself essentially, and I think the others end up doing that as well, then that's what heals, that issue, as opposed to just like, clean and sober, end of,
Yeah. The
like that.
story
It
ends
just doesn't.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, like for some people, that does work, which is great. But like for some, the statistic is like 95% of people who go to AA or some similar program just that is not the thing that helps them. Like they just don't. It doesn't work for them. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like with the whole bed issue, like I think what I see in there as well is like this system failure where it's like the bed is, like they don't say this in the show, so I don't want to like imbue this meaning to it, but like in reality, it's like the bed might be gone, because there's so many people who are struggling. Like I live close to the downtown east side, like I'm very like I'm confronted by this all the time, where it's like these systems are just failing people. And so in the show, I do feel like it kind of was just like, nah, you can't come back. Like it was very like she broke the protocol, she can't come back, and now you're gone too. And it's like these, that might happen, but it's a lot of the time because the bed is no longer available, because if you're gone, somebody else is coming in there.
Yeah.
And and I don't know, like maybe people in those positions of like support worker are like at their end, like they're so
Yeah.
stressed, so overworked, that it's like they say things like, well, I'm going to give the bed to somebody who wants to be here, and
Yeah.
that's like that's that reaction. But like I feel like it's just such a systemic thing where it's like, yeah, now this person is gone, which they've left the safety of the place where they've like possibly been detoxing, so they don't have the drug in their system. If they go out and use a now unfamiliar environment, it makes it way more likely that they're going to use too much, that they can overdose a lot more easily when they're out of a familiar space, um, and following detox. So it's like it's very, very dangerous as well, these systemic issues that like, when those things happen, um, and that's the thing is like people turn on you, you're left on the street, and like then you just like, so many people aren't so lucky to just like, be able to count to seven and, have the twin connection and all of those things that sort of save Luke. Like a lot of people don't have that, where it's like they leave for whatever reason and then they're not welcome back because there is no space. And then it's like, what are they left to do? Like there's just,
Yeah.
it's really, really tragic. And there's this other
Yeah.
thing that I'm thinking of too about this. I'm sure people who are familiar with addiction research, they know about this study, but like where it was like these rats with cocaine, and like if the rat didn't have any other rats around it or any other rat like lifestyle around it, it was just the rat in the cage, they would give themselves cocaine until they died. But if they had like at the other end of the cage like all their rat buddies and like, maybe some like little tubes to run around and some hay and some whatever little rat vibes, they would have their cocaine, and they wouldn't like take the cocaine until they died. Like they would have this little community of rats, and they would, so that's, I think, like leans into a lot of what you're saying about like the community approach is often the thing that is the saving grace in a lot of these programs, is like you have people who are there, they're witnessing you. Um, and yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, my last popcorn therapy episode actually was on the F1 movie with my old friend David Hatfield, and we were talking about masculinity in the F1 movie. But the conversation with him was like so interesting aside from the F1 movie. Like I'd recommend listening to it even if you don't have any plans to watch that particular show. It's one of the ones you can spoil because it's like a pretty predictable ending. But David was talking a lot about this concept of initiation, and he had done all this work researching other cultures where they had this really clear sense of like, okay, we're going to gather together as a community, and we're going to learn together what it means for you to become an adult in this community, and here's how we're going to value you and like see who you are and so on. And he was just talking about it as such a protective factor against something like addiction, because so many, this is a whole other topic, but so many of the young men in our current society are so lost, right? Like they're so lost, they're so confused, and there's nobody kind of around them reminding them of who they are and like where they belong and why they belong and things like that. And so they can get lost into like incel culture and other things.
Or yeah, like the
So
people who are around them are people who are espousing some pretty like hateful, toxic
yeah,
rhetoric.
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, it was so interesting. I highly recommend it. But the other thing that you're making me think of now that we're talking about it is there's a moment when Luke is out on the street and he is looking for Joey, and I think she's stolen his money and all of these things. He actually goes to a fire. It's like it looks like the downtown east side, right? It looks like this area where, it's everybody's doing drugs in this area or whatever, and there are people gathered around a fire, and he's so cold because he's experiencing Nell's death throes, and he goes up to this fire to like try to warm his hands. And it's interesting because he sees the man in the bowler hat and he leaves because of the man in the bowler hat. So it's actually making me wonder, if the man in the bowler hat wasn't there, would he have just warmed himself by this fire and then done some heroin and gone right back to where he was before? And like, could the bowler hat man have had a benevolent quality, like the bent neck lady, of kind of being like, no,
Mm.
like, I'm going to scare you out of here because this is actually not where you're supposed to be. And he ends up like, it's when he's waiting to be picked up, I think, by Steven, when he actually encounters the bowler hat man, and it's his mom saying, come home, right? Like it's actually
Hmm.
a very beautiful face. and so on. So actually, I wonder if even the bowler hat man was meant to be like, it's scary because you just think it's scary, but actually maybe it's somebody trying to help you, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So obviously there's a lot with this show, and maybe we'll come back to it next Halloween when we rewatch because I feel like that's a great tradition to rewatch it because I feel like there's so many details there, and obviously other people have talked about it. This is like a well-beloved show.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the major pieces that I really wanted to talk about because yeah, some of that stuff really touched me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I had kind of that reaction of like, I'm watching this horror movie and I'm just sobbing, like crying, like it's so beautiful,
Yeah.
so sad and heartbreaking. And it's like that's not the reaction I was expecting to have, right? So yeah, I really appreciate you pushing me to actually watch it
I'm
and
so
to
glad
be
that
able
you
to chat
did.
about it. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
am so glad I did too. It's really, really good. Okay, thank you so much, Emily. We'll catch up for the next horror or Love is Blind, whichever
Yeah.
comes first.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode on The Haunting of Hill House with me and Emily Nimitz. I hope that you enjoyed that. And I would love to know your thoughts if you want to share anything that's come up for you around this series. I know a lot of people have watched it a lot more times than I have and really loved it. Just FYI, I'm a little slower right now because I am working on my next book, which is Mythology and Tarot, which I'm really excited about. So you may not hear from me as much, but make sure that you're subscribed to whether it's the YouTube channel, the podcast on Spotify, wherever you listen. And you'll get those notifications when a new episode is coming out. So I'm doing my best, but I'm just going to be a little bit slow while I'm trying to finish this book. If you want more from me, you can go to juliepeters.ca and you can get a tarot reading from me if you want. You can check out my books. You can also sign up for a counseling session for me. I also have some new tarot offerings that you can do remotely. So you basically sign up for the tarot reading that week, and then I remotely do the reading for you. So you're not actually present for that reading. It's a little video recording that I'll send you within that week, and then you can watch it on your own time. Great if you have a question. I do a 1-card pull if you just have like a little question. I can also do something nice and meaty, like a year ahead spread where you get a card for each of the months upcoming in the year. And that one especially is an awesome gift for the holidays. So you might want to think about, that witchy person in your life or whoever it is, and get them my book, get them my books, all of them, and sign them up for a tarot reading. It's a really nice thing to offer for the holidays too. So you can find all that information at juliepeters.ca. Don't be afraid to be in touch, and thanks for listening.